All right, loves. Hello, hello, hello. I've been trying to wrap up the end of the uh, kind of homeschooling year for the boys the last few weeks and dealing with some things. We needed to figure out if we were going to sign up for a local alternative school that they have here called Orla. It's Olympia um, Regional Alternative Learning or Alternative Academy, I think it was. And we were going over how much we had left of the curriculum we have been working through um, for this past year in grade. And we were seeing where we're at and what we could do to help finish off and still keep our momentum going or not. And so we came to the decision that we were going to do year-round school with some breaks. That's going to be a little bit off at first because we have lots of family who want to come and visit. We've only been gone from the living more closer to more of the family since November, and I know that's months and months, but we were just so involved in the family and community back there that we have people who want to come and visit us and stay connected and kind of take advantage that they have a family with a nice bit of space so that they can come and visit. And the problem is because we homeschool, if you're a homeschooler, you know that people don't always understand that you still have to keep your own type of schedule, and them coming to visit is disruptive for the space and time you need to be able to do your learning activities. We don't unschool. I really admire and have made quite a few friends within the unschooling local community. We're actually part of an unschooling co-op. Um, we use it as a social avenue for us and for creating friendships, but we also participate in helping to provide, like, the topic for this last Thursday at our co-op was art. And so we brought some of our colored pencils and drawing paper, and we have these cool little books that teach how to draw, like Phineas and Ferb and Pokemon characters. And then we had picked up a book to learn how to draw little forest animals like fawns and rabbits and squirrels and such to share with our friends. So we brought them to the co-op, and they were very simple designs that we could easily show each other how to sketch and work through it. Um, it was really big to put in the application for the Orla program, and it's funded through the public school system, or for the funding for those kind of schools or charter school type things. And I don't know understand it exactly comparatively to Utah's charter system or alternative schooling initiatives, but it basically is supposed to be like alternative classes or supplemental classes for your homeschooling or alternative learning situation. They do Montessori there as well, which we didn't qualify for the cutoff dates for signing up for that kind of stuff. But we did qualify for signing up for some of the supplemental classes, everything from like band and orchestra, swing dancing, PE type stuff, to science classes done in alternative ways, like real life science focus on chemistry, or robotics, things like that, where it's a little bit more costly. And if you've ever looked at any kind of Lego robotics, or excuse me, or other program like that, it can be a bit pricey, not just for the kits, but also for the learning curriculum you can get to, or software program to get to go with it. So this is a way to have the public funding help with curriculum and things that we can borrow for the semester or the year. They have like a circulation lending library type of thing that we can access as being part of their school. So we're hoping that that might help with curriculum issues. But technically, I have gotten the basic curriculum or some curriculum to use for the year, and actually for a few years. I have um, the fiver or five in a row and beyond five in a row curriculum books that guide you with lesson plans for using some um, nonfiction and fiction books that they cover in their curriculum books to help with covering history, geography, music, art, um, social or character studies and things like that that are like not part of like doesn't necessarily cover math. There is a little bit of math in the main 5 in a row curriculum, but not so much in the beyond 5 in a row, but it does have science and those other ones I mentioned before, and some language arts. What it really doesn't cover is basically math and grammar and some penmanship and some basic language arts skill stuff, and possibly not fully covering spelling. It does have some vocabulary and spelling in it, but not a full program. So what I did find this last summer was the Fun Schooling journals, and we have been working through the Fun Schooling journal, spelling journal. My youngest has been working through this one. This is the one he picked. I will do a different video on these journals if you want me to, but this is this Fun Spelling journal. It's based on a right brain learning technique that works well for kids with dyslexia or Asperger's or ADD and things like that. It helps kids with those types of issues, but kids without those issues can also learn spelling and vocabulary very well through this program as well. It uses teach your child to read, write, draw, and spell with 180 pages of fun activities for ages 5 and up. Now, for those who are 5 and 6 and lower grades that don't know how to read yet, the parent will need to, hold on one moment, will need to help read the poems at the beginning and then guide them through working with the activities in here. And it is encouraged to do coloring activities and stuff throughout the whole thing. The next section is search for your house for 10, in this case, 3-letter words. And then they have it all the way up to like a lot of 7 and 8-letter words. And I think there was 1 or 2 pages that said like 11-letter words. And then they have a section of, here's one my son did. Let's see. He colored in this one. He liked the picture and wanted to do kind of a shading technique, I guess. And he's like fooled around with the 5 words he could pick that were influenced by what was in the picture. He went from using the gel pens that they suggest to erasable color pencil to crayon because he just found whatever he could to do the work in that moment. And the next section after the finding the words, 5 words to match the picture is again, I can do a whole video on these, but the other one was more specific for age level. This one is teach your child 100 words to read, write, and spell, or read, write, spell, and draw. And these are the 100 words that every child should master by age 10. And this one's by Anna Brown, another member of the Brown family, who is the family that created the Thinking Tree Publishing Company. This one has like a poem as well. Basically, you read the poem, and if your child is younger and they're not reading yet, you read it to them and then help them memorize the poem. They have a color page or a draw my food and habitat, and then a fill in the blank. And then sometimes there's a page where there's a missing body part area where they can draw that if they want to. And so this is another one for read, write, and spell and draw, using different part of the brain to help learn the spelling techniques. With this book, I think it did pretty well. There's some words that he didn't do some of it right for a short period of time, and then I caught what he was doing for a bit of it, he was doing this thing where he was just shading the words. He said his hand had started hurting trying to fill in the bubble words. And I said, okay, well, that isn't really an effective way to learn the words. So instead, what you can do is I had him start just writing inside the bubble to give it color so that he did properly spell it instead. And then, of course, do the missing blanks and all that stuff. So I think because he did a certain part of the book like that, where he was just scribbling it in and not really writing them out, I think it affected his results a little bit because there's about 20 words he needs to practice a bit more. But they are some of those words like the could, should, would words he still has a lot of problems with. He gets most of the consonants correct. It's the O, U, middle that he's having some problems on. And some of the names of the animals with the double letters in them, that's a little tricky for him. So yeah, we have a few words yet that he still needs to get down, and I'm hoping we can get those last 20 worked out through the summer. But aside from that, I really feel that this book has helped my Griffin. It was just the right time to do it because he finally started actually reading this year after I started using these, and I think he's in that age range where some kids just finally are developmentally ready to read. And we just happen to be using the Unschooling books at the same time. So, but I do feel it was part of the equation of helping my younger son to actually start reading, and it's been really exciting. We noticed the big difference starting in February, and that was very awesome to actually figure out that he was really reading and not just kind of mimicking or memorizing off of what I was saying. So it was really cool. We have been through the earlier part of the year, and while we were still working with the Harmony Education Services over in Utah, we were using Khan Academy and a few other online avenues, as well as some like printed worksheets to work through math. But around the same time period near January, we figured out that we weren't making great progress with Khan Academy. My kids had been kind of skipping around and just studying whatever they wanted when it came to math. And then they found that they weren't making progress and they were actually getting marked down on some skills instead of moving ahead in mastery. So we decided that we needed to go ahead and pull the Life of Fred curriculum and work all the way through it from the beginning. It is advised with the Life of Fred curriculum because it is a totally different program of learning math through story and practical application within the stories of how you would use math skills in real life, like working with money and time and figuring out measurement and yeah, a lot of practical application situations. So it is advised, even if you're starting these books at third grade or fourth, that you start right at the beginning of the series and work your way forward. And that by the time you do that, you'll have covered all of your math addition and subtraction facts and have started your multiplication. As a matter of fact, you start your multiplication in the third grade and sort of the end of the second grade level. There's 2 books per level of grade, and a lot of people, I had heard the big debate on whether or not Life of Fred was enough, and I've got to tell you, we've been sort of speeding through the curriculum, and yeah, it's kind of, some of it's review for my boys, but there were some gap areas that they really needed help with, especially Griffin. He had been having some trouble for a while really getting those math facts down, and they advised doing, like games like Yahtzee and Uno and just working with card deck, regular playing card deck, and doing some math type games that they give some instruction on here. And we had another book called Family Math that had some really great ideas for math games and activities to help the the younger child's brain to really understand math concepts and take it on, as well as practice some of those math facts and really get them down. Griffin doesn't really do well with speed stuff. He needs something easy he can remember how to do, and then he works through it and he does figure it out. So the combination with the Life of Fred, we are now caught up to grade level and we're repeating the grade level he's at. He was at the third, and we're going to repeat the third level 2 books for the summer. And that's the wrong journal. I have, where did I write it up? I have the, one moment, let me pause. Okay, so with the Life of Fred books, we use the graphic composition books, which has the graphic books, graph paper. Griffey really works well with this because it helps him organize his space. We've learned since we've been homeschooling that Griffin's eyes don't always track properly. And we have tried doing at-home exercises for correcting his tracking. And it seems like every so often we have to practice the exercises again to get him on task again, because he can be very sloppy and big in his writing and not very neat in what he's doing. And then he can be very precise and write really tiny and do so much better, just depending on what is going on. Sometimes I write for him and he tells me what to write, but mostly he does it. And he really, it just depends. Sometimes he can do it just fine. He writes better some days than he does others. And sometimes it's just easier, like for the practice row, I'll write them down and then he writes in his answers around what I've written. So it is his handwork as well. With the dysgraphia, I try to make it, not that he doesn't practice the skills he needs with his hands, but I tried to make the focus on the lesson of what's going on at hand with Fred and less about how well his handwriting is. We have come a long way with it, and I wasn't sure because they were like, oh, this is just reading and yada yada. But once they really got into Fred, Griffin was like really enjoying the silliness of some of the stories and really practically thinking about some of the scenarios, and he would give his opinion on how that would really go, or why the heck would there be a talking duck, or different issues, and he liked that aspect of it. So yeah, I really do feel that this description of the Life of Fred, why choose Fred, fun, comprehensive, motivating, not kill and drill, which is totally true. Griffin could, and even Eric could get intimidated by a book that had way too many practice problems. But at the same time, we probably may go back to Khan Academy to offer practice problems, which means they only have to do as much as what they show a mastery of, and then usually they move on or can move on to another section and they'll earn their badges on Khan Academy. We haven't been doing it for now because I wanted to go ahead and do their repeat level of rereading the 2 books for the current grade that they're ending, and then I think I will be accessing the Khan Academy for practice problems after that. So yeah, this is what we're wrapping up, and we're going to do our second run through of the current grade they're leading, and then we'll be ready for next year's grade, Griffin 4th and Eric 5th in math, through the Life of Fred books. So yeah, and accessing some of the practice games and stuff that they mentioned for these grade levels. The other thing we're working with is the primary language lessons by Emma Searle. I compared this book to 3rd and 4th grade workbooks on offer from the Barnes & Noble. I think Flash Kids are one of those workbooks, and this is considered 2nd and 3rd, comparable to 3rd and 4th, and this was actually right, I feel a little bit higher in skill than the typical 2nd and 3rd workbooks. So I felt a lot better about having Eric backtrack and do the third, leaning into fourth grade work, to make sure his writing skills were where they needed to be, to handle larger writing, because he was very intimidated by paragraph and essay writing and such. And I'm easing him into larger writing work. And Griffin, he hardly was reading before, so how could he even write at the levels he needed to for his grades? So we are going through this program progressively, as well as doing other projects that I feel will help them move forward in their language arts skills. And this has a little bit of Charlotte Mason techniques in here, copy work, narration, studying pictures, art, and quality writings such as fables and writings of the time. This curriculum was originally created during um, the late 19th century and early 20th century literature and textbooks, and this is a modern reprint. They started the newer copyright at 1996, and this is the 10th printing as of 2012, and this is very favored amongst certain homeschooling groups. And there is a touch of slightly Christian friendly stuff in here, but not overtly religious or anything like that. So I find this doable, and I actually kind of like that, because as much as we are secular and I am earth spiritual, my kids are seasonally friendly with things. No, I don't want you tipping. Silly cat. Go get water in the other room. Sorry, folks. Um, I do want them to have a good understanding of their peers' cultural and religious um, where they're coming from, and we have family who are of Christian, and I have everything from Mormons to Baptists and Lutherans and Jehovah Witnesses and all different kinds of people on my side of the family. Um, and so having that involved is good, because it opens discussion for understanding how they think of things. We don't raise our children within the idea of sin and certain aspects that are very much part of the Christian faith. But we also don't talk down about it, and we don't talk negatively about other people's religion. However, I have noticed that my older boy tends to get a little crabby about how the Christian faiths have basically taken and used the older folklore practices or folk practices and grabbed their holidays and adapted them for their own use. Um, he he feels very strongly that it was kind of stealing, and it's not fair that they get all up and upset when people threaten to damage their Christian symbolism in holy places, when it seemed like it was just fine for the Christians to come in and bulldoze and destroy the other spiritual cultures and practices of other people, and think it's perfectly fine to do that. I see his logic, and I very much agree, but I also remind him that the people living today were not the ones who took those actions against the older folk people and the religions of that time, and that we can take upon ourselves to pick up the culture and not religious, but spiritual beliefs and life practices of our ancestors if we so choose, and honor and have good relation with the nature and spiritual beings we find and believe that are around us. That is our right to choose in our country, that we get to choose how we wish to express and involve ourselves spiritually. Okay, and that we still need to show respect even to faiths that we don't agree with or have issues with. Um, so this even though it's a literature book, a language arts book and grammar, um, it's brought up some interesting discussions. Not just this one, but also Five in a Row. Though it can be used secularly, the one that we got that's a transitional book I bought by myself. It's the Five in a Row Volume 4. That one has a section of Bible verses and stuff. We don't use that part of it. We use the regular lessons from the children's more higher up learning picture books that are like just before chapter books. And we also use the cooking section that is after that for those books, but it has again brought up interesting things because one of the books in the main curriculum of 5 in a row, like The Clown of God, actually does show quite a bit of Christian stuff and maybe even Catholic stuff. And it brought about very good discussions of that faith and what it was like back then culturally for people who were not of the faith or who were on the fringes and who were very devout. So I welcome those discussions, but I also don't teach the Bible in our home, especially since most people use the Bible that's been heavily edited and adapted for the use of certain kings, like the King James Version it isn't even the original Bible writings, so heavily edited and adapted for his use, as well as others. So moving beyond that, um, I also have a journal that they have to use with some of these if they're short enough writings that my sons feel that they can handle the writings to do a rough draft kind of in here, or other things. This might actually be the science one. Yeah, this is the science one that we're doing online and some other. We have similar journals for language arts that we use with this one, but we started doing more of the language art practices, writings, copy work, and certain things like that on the Google Docs through my one of my accounts. And because the kids were a little bit young to have their own email accounts to have a Google Docs file. And the nice thing about Google Docs is, I believe this last year I've been encouraging the type themselves, but recently we noticed that Google Docs has its own, almost like the Dragon program where you can speak to it and it brings up or types up what you're saying, and then you can go through and edit it yourself where you wanted the punctuation and to sound and all that stuff. So with those things, I feel like we're kind of helping to adapt beyond the hand pain and some of the other things, and also the spell check in it is also helping show them how to compare words to figure out which is the right word, and maybe even look up the meanings if needed. So those are kind of the core, our math, language arts, and spelling program right here. Life of Fred, the Unschooling spelling journals, and we do have their next sets ready for next fall, and a seasonal one that's good for the in-between times. So if Griffin and Eric finally get done with these a bit ahead before the fall season for that part of the year-round school, we'll use the seasonal book for a little bit, and maybe even some of the spelling pages in the other journals. In the main journals that cover multiple subjects, such as we picked the Nature and Study and Outdoor Science Journal. This one is actually my older boy's, Eric's, for the summer, but Griffin had asked if he could use the notebook and noticed that some of the pages in this match some of parts of the pages in this one. And he said, can I just take like the instruction for, say, like some of the pages have boxes just like this, but a full page of it and no lines. And can I just take the instruction and put it above or in that box and then draw in or do what the instruction said in the rest of the boxes? And he can decide whether he wants to try to write or type up something he learned about bugs or whatever the subject might be that he was drawing, and paste it in the writing section. And I said that was an awesome idea for adapting the Unschooling Curious Creatures notebook. It says you can use it any way you want, and there's not a lot of instructions for how to use it. Now, Sarah Brown has a thing where you can print within your family. So we can print sections out of here and have within the family use them for my boys. So I can legally, it's totally fine to buy one copy and then spread it for however many kids you have in your home. So what's going to happen is I have printed some of the main ones. He went and flipped through and said he picked a lot of the ones that were like the life cycle ones. He picked all of those. Show me the life cycle of the frog, the bird, the butterfly. There were certain ones. I'm not sure if it was the bird, the frog. Let's see. Fun facts about insects again. Learn more about insects. They had how to draw. Sections here's draw missing parts of the duck, draw the whole duck, sketch over. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the right page. Sticking. Here's color, trace, and then draw the missing parts, and then draw the whole animal. So it's a kind of a drawing method that helps you learn different parts of it, and then you try to do the whole thing by yourself. He picked a lot of those. But then we went through and we noticed in the nature journal that like there's these for draw something from January, February, and so on. So this book really isn't meant to just be done through the summer. It's meant to maybe you do some of it in the summer, some of it in the fall, some of it in the spring and winter. Here's a section suggestion that he said, oh, I could just take this suggested learning thing, like collect small things from nature and make it a nature craft. He says, when I want to, can I just have you write that instruction on the page I want to use it for in the notebook? And then I can just draw what I did or take a picture and put it in the section and do it like that. And I said, yeah, that's cool. And again, like these poems, if there's a movie time thing he wants to do too, there's some extra ones towards the back of the book that we'll be able to copy and use. And there's a certain point in this book where it becomes no longer directed. The rest of this book is wordless. It's about a third or a quarter, something like that, of the back end of this book. That is no instruction. You've already had most of the book with lots of ideas and instructions on how to use it. And now that you've done that much of it, they're saying, oh, you can figure out how to use the rest and use it however you want. The only thing that doesn't get repeated in that section, there's a few things, but one of them is almost like the news pages in some of the other books, which I can show you another time, is animals of the world, what animal you're learning about, draw a male, a female, color in where the animal lives in the world. Learn about nature, weather, or animals from different continents. Some of these are not repeated in the back of the wordless section. Here's a spelling time. It's shorter than what you find in a typical learning journal. It's just 5 words. You decide if you're learning about a plant or an animal and draw it below. And then you find, look in your nature books for 5 words that have some of the same letters as this plant or animal, and then you put those 5 words here. So Eric said, well, when I do a page like this or that, these ones that I notice you don't have in there yet, I'll ask you before I start filling it out if you want a copy of it. And then Griffin can add it to his little binder, handcrafted nature study book that he's putting together here. So they've worked out what they think is a good deal, so we didn't have to buy 2 of them, and Griffin could use the notebook instead of the full nature journal for himself. I thought that was a pretty good compromise considering everything else we're doing for the summer. So we're really looking forward to it. We have an animal encyclopedia and a geology book that we'll be using for the summer that also has some really good science on the planet and geography, and combining it with this animal book and a few books that we found from the library, like the Practical Naturalist for the summer. And Griffey wants to do some learning different styles of comic and drawing styles that he learned from a book we got from the library that we made copies out of part of it so he could practice on his own and not have to rush through it so he can give the book back. We're not planning on selling it or distributing it, so we copied it for ourselves. And then we found also this book on trees, leaves, and bark. We're in a new area, and it's kind of important to me that they learn what plants are safe to interact with and not. Most trees, leaves, and bark should be fine, and this way they'll learn about identification skills. And then I'm going to get a book on what plants not to touch, like stinging nettle, or how to safely touch plants like that. And thus, kind of leading into that is this kid's guide to first aid. We're going to cover part of it for as long as we can keep the book here for the beginning of summer, and then we'll just check this out every once in a while to try to finish through this book for first aid. They got to cover a bit about first aid in Scouts. They were in Scouts the last 3 years or so, so it'll be a good refresher. And we have to finish up a section or two on this book because we have to turn it in soon. It's the City Critters, Wildlife in the Urban Jungle. We're living in kind of a city area, but we're closer to almost like a suburban / forest area. But we are very close to water life and stuff. So I wanted to go over some of the marine life and stuff we might run into, as well as other aquatic life and different things that they do bring up in this book. So yeah, I feel like we have a fairly good mix of library and some spine books in our own personal library at home, and those that we're checking out from the public library to use with the fun schooling books. Now I do have one to use for the start of fall that we were originally going to use for the summer, but my older boy noticed that it had some larger writing assignment type things that he didn't feel he was ready to try to pursue for the summer, that he was willing to start them in the fall. It was connected to the spelling, but leading into more paragraph and essay type writing. And he already knew that we were going to be still finishing up our language book during the summer, and he really wanted to have a slightly lighter load through the rest of the summer. So I agreed. That's why we got the nature book instead, and we ended up Griffin noticed that some of the notebook pages in his freeform notebook matched up with the nature book, so he didn't want to have to buy a second nature book. Now, if he decides later that he does end up wanting it, say next summer, then we can probably do that. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty good idea. And the last thing that we're going to be doing this summer, and probably continuing into the fall, is they've both chosen books to work through, and we've been trying to get reading going. Mostly I've been doing the reading, and now Griffin's reading a bit better. And Eric found this really cool book. He didn't want to have to wait for me for when I'm ready to do reading with him. So what he's going to do is read a chapter, and then he's going to tell me what he remembers of the chapter, kind of retell it or narrate it to me, and enjoy the book without having to do any writing assignments related to it. He really hates it when I turn fun reading into some kind of writing assignment or whatever, when he really just wants to be able to enjoy the story and take it in. And I figured retelling to me was good enough so I can make sure he's retaining and really understanding what he's reading. And I also encouraged him to every once in a while read aloud to me. So, because I noticed with some of the larger words that he doesn't see all the time, he has some trouble with them. And I wanted to encourage him to break out our big, slightly pictionary dictionary that we have, to help him with some of those bigger words that he doesn't know that well, or to look it up on his iPad to see the pronunciation or the meaning, so he understood the story better that he's reading in the Warrior Cat series. He loves cats, and We happened to be at the library and I was picking a couple things up and I said, hey, why don't you just thumb through the first chapter or the description and see if you might like this book. And if you don't want to, we won't get it. But if you do, we'll totally check it out. And he did. He sat down and read it. And he was like, yes, I need to read this book. And I was like, yay, we got him a book he wants to read. So that was the compromise, was that I couldn't apply any spelling or writing assignments to the learning or to the reading. And that will go also for Griffin's Magic Treehouse books. The only thing is with Griffin is I will have to read with him until we both feel that he can kind of get through it on his own and only have to come to me for the occasional trouble word or dictionary. Okay. So yeah, so that's the plan for the summer and probably even leading into the fall. And then we plan to actually either figure out if we're going to do Fiverr, Beyond Fiverr, and then do the All About Animal books part-time mixing with Fiverr, or maybe make that the Friday book work or something else, because we have the supplementary classes coming up with Orla in the fall. We're going to have to see how busy we are. When I tried to do the child-led learning during part of this year, it kind of threw us off Fiverr. I could have kept pushing it, but there was some other things going on, like figuring out that we needed to redo some stuff in math to make sure we understood where we were supposed to be and really got the concepts down. And also we had tried doing the fun learning Minecraft journal, which actually didn't work out as well as we were hoping. Although I think it was more of an intimidation of some of the research and science that was offered in that Minecraft book. They just didn't seem to be ready for that level of writing slash research work. Or I don't even know how to describe it. There was something about how it was. They actually came out with a Minecraft book in this midwinter, early spring that I wish they had come out with last summer, because it seems it was more geared towards the level, especially my younger son was at, and I could have maybe used it, finagled it for a bit for my older son. But by the time we were moved to full homeschooling, I didn't have a lot of extra money for curriculum, and I barely had gotten kind of a good agreement with my husband for how to handle the ordering of stuff towards the end of the year and into the summer for next fall. So I couldn't really order too much. But we've worked some things out, so I really decided that I just need to see how the summer goes with these journals before I order any more of the journals. Because I did order even one of the ones that has more of a boy-friendly one that my older son picked, and then realized that, oh, before I order any more, I need to see how well they do this summer with this nature journal one, and finishing up the spelling before I really get down to ordering anything else. And of course, I need to make sure we finish off our fourth and third through the summer, so that I know for sure that Eric is ready for me to buy the fifth grade level stuff and be ready to go at the very beginning of the year. Luckily, the Life of Fred books, even the nice thing about the next coming level, the intermediary and the pre-algebra level, is that the intermediary I'm going to be able to use for at least a year, if not 2 years, with both the boys. Actually, Griffin isn't going to even be ready for it partially yet until maybe one of the first of the 3 books for the intermediary level of 5th and 6th grade. Also, they say you can kind of use it at the end of 4th for the very first book of that set. And that's the level Griffin will be at. He will be covering like I said, the end of 3rd for a second time, the 3rd grade level for a second time this summer of the 2 books for 3rd, and then he'll be ready for the 4th grade books. But because we've already gone through all of the elementary set, we will probably repeat going into the 4th and then repeat it once, and then we should be ready for the intermediary books as well for Griffin. And Eric will just need to repeat the intermediary books once before we go to the pre-algebra sets. And yeah, so there'll be some progression. And that's why math is the only one I really need to buy more of. The fun schooling is just another type of schooling that you can do with Unschool. You can do it with Fiverr. You could do it with any kind of journal. It's like a journaling base with repetitive forms. But Fiverr also had some notebooking books that are kind of like these journaling books, not quite as fun and flashy and drawy as this, but still it would be doable that I could buy instead, where I only have to buy one set of these notebook pages book that come with the 5 in a row notebooking framework pages that I can make my own notebooks with. So I may not want to spend quite so much getting so many of the fun schooling, and I may just dual between that. I may get the file to be able to print my own notebooking and make my own notebooks for the kids, and then maybe occasionally get the specialized fun schooling journals for part-time use or partial use through different parts of the schooling year, because I really feel like so far trying to just go child-led and a bit more unschooling doesn't quite work for us. My boys are so techy and so wrapped up into gaming that I can't seem to get them to really understand that they need to choose and pick for themselves activities to move forward. They seem to think that it's my job to push and pull and move them forward. And I know that's partly what I have done, but my husband is not fully comfortable with just kind of letting them not meet certain expectations and show progress as basic as possible. There's been a lot of compromise since our move, and we've talked about things, and he's seen more of the learning difficulties Griffin has been having, and also understands better where Eric's coming from with his anxiety and harder writing techniques. And it isn't even harder, it's just progressing through the different skills, and they have some issues with it. So we also have talked about all those things that goes into budgeting and dealing with homeschooling. So I think the nice thing about this move is my husband's now getting a better picture of what homeschooling is and how that works, and how his boys have more learning issues, more closer to my issues, because they come from me and from him. So they're really smart, but they have some learning things. And his when he was growing up, he didn't need as much help, and he didn't have as many learning struggles, and he wasn't much of a reluctant learner or reading troubles or any of those things. So it's been a little bit harder for him to understand what our boys are going through, but he is starting to open his eyes to it and be more understanding of what we need to do to help them through it, instead of just saying we'll just put them back in public school and have them help them work it out. I I really appreciate him taking the time to understand that and see my point of view and really take a peek and see where the boys are at. So, thank you, honey. um, but we are on task now, and going through all this, I think, is really made for stronger foundation for moving forward. So thank you so much for sitting through all this. I know this was a bit long, and for those of you who pettered out or skipped ahead, I totally understand. If you're not into homeschooling, this is probably what the heck is this woman talking about. I will try to put a note in the description about what basically this video is, and like, hey, warning, homeschooling, if you're not into it, don't watch, that kind of thing. But this is basically a huge chunk of my life, and on the sides and edges of all this homeschooling am I practicing my spirituality, engaging with nature, and encouraging my boys to step away from the screen and actually see what birds are making the beautiful sounds outside, and what new plants, and how to navigate the neighborhoods without having such clear skies and open areas to try to navigate the neighborhood through. And yeah, all those good things. So I hope you found this interesting. If you would like me to show more of curriculum or ideas, or talk about anything homeschooling that I brought up, or you have some ideas, I'd be happy to discuss that and share. please do feel free to communicate with me in that way. And yeah, if you like this, please like below. And if you have been enjoying my channel, please subscribe. Uh, and yeah, let me know if you'd like more of this or to just more stick with more of the spiritual stuff or whatever. Because I'm going to do kind of what I want, but I will gear it towards what you want to see too. Okay? All right. Peace. Thanks again. Blessings from the land, sea, and sky. And if you're homeschooling, may you be blessed and may you find your path easier, if not as easily as we have been doing. Not that it's been that easy, but may you be blessed as well. Okay. Peace.